Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the president of Romance Writers of America, Cindy Kirk.
Good morning. Woo! All right. Good morning, and welcome to our general session featuring Julia Quinn. Woo! Before we get started, it's my pleasure to announce today's lucky volunteer winner of a free 2016 RWA conference, and remember that's in beautiful San Diego. All right, who else? Where else can you win a free conference for volunteering a couple of hours? Think about it. Today's winner is Deborah J. Moser. Congratulations, Deb. Just a quick housekeeping thing before we get started. No, you don't have to pull out the phones and look for changes in your schedule or whatever. This is just a pat on the back to the board and we're keeping you fit. We not only have the Pilates, and aerobics classes, you notice that, but we're having the escalators. We're allowing them to not work, but just to let you know, the hotel is working on that, and they'll probably have it fixed, I don't know, by the time we leave. So, in case you're interested, which I think you all are, Romance Writers of America would like to thank everyone who helped make the 2015 Readers for Life literacy autographing so successful. We raised $48,789.06 for literary charities. Woo! Good deal. The beneficiaries this year are Pro-Literacy Worldwide, Literacy Partners of New York, and the Literacy Assistance Center of New York. Please welcome Peter Waite, who will accept the check on behalf of Pro-Literacy and its partner organizations.
Thank you very much. On behalf of both Pro-Literacy as well as our two partner programs, Literacy Assistance Center and Literacy Partners in New York, we're honored to be recipients of that. I don't think it's any secret for all of you that the work that happens around this country happens thanks to the kinds of commitment and the kind of work of organizations like Romance Writers of America. And you're approaching almost $1 million in donations that have come to adult literacy throughout the United States and worldwide. Thank you so much, Roy. Thank you very much.
Would you like to say? No. Come on and say a word.
On behalf of the Literacy Assistance Center of New York, I just want to say how honored we are, how humbled we are to be associated with this organization, with all of you, and how grateful we are for your support of adult literacy in New York and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as you noticed, there was no real check to give them because really, let's just say the check's in the mail. No, I'm sure they've got it. Okay. Each year we like to take time to recognize those people outside our general membership who have made a significant contribution to our association. Our industry partners are vital to RWA. Booksellers, librarians, and media representatives provide us with their professional support, and we're grateful for their involvement. The bookseller of the year is Tom Luce. This award is given annually to one special bookseller who provides outstanding service to romance readers and who demonstrates notable support of romance authors in the romance genre. And Tom Luce is just that person. And if the name doesn't sound familiar, well, I think it should, but if it doesn't, maybe Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon, sort of, yeah. Congratulations, Tom.
Thank you all so much. I was at Powell's in the 90s and then moved back to Michigan, where I grew up, to spend time with my family. And stumbled my way into Borders and became a buyer there. And that's when I got involved in romance. And to sum the whole thing up, you guys are my people. And this has just been an amazing ride. And I'm just so honored and pleased to be here and to be a part of the success of this whole industry. So thank you very much.
The next award is always a favorite too, the Librarian of the Year. And this year, Lisa Schimmer is our Librarian of the Year. This award is given to a librarian who demonstrates outstanding support of romance authors in the romance genre. Lisa is a senior cataloger at Novel List, a division of, I love this, EBSCO, Information Services. During the past several years, Lisa has been integral to improving the cataloging of romance novels. Her work impacts the entire library community by helping librarians and the readers find the right romances for them. Could I give her my name and then she could just always put my, no, oh no. No, that's for a later conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome Lisa Schimmer.
Yay! I don't have much to say except for thank you. This has been fabulous. I've loved being here. You guys are great. You're so warm. You're so welcoming. I don't want to go back to work on Monday, even though I have lots of romance novels to go with me and lots more romance novels to work on when I get there. But my work was just born out of my love for romance and the frustration of not being able to find what I wanted to find in a library catalog using Library of Congress subject heading. So, when I'm in the mood for that secret baby or like that Duke or whatever, I had to be the change that I wanted to see. Thank you guys so much. And also I should probably thank novelists for taking a chance on me and letting me just, get in there and mess things up. So thank you. Okay.
And then we'll take a picture. Thank you, Lisa. The Veritas Award is given for the article that appears in print or in another medium that best depicts the romance genre in a positive light. Yes. This year, we would like to recognize Joyce. I told her I'd like to sort of like mess up her name because it's so easy to say. I have to say it right. Joyce Lamb, curator of the Happily Ever After blog. And this is for her article, Things We Love About EW's Spread on Romance Novels. Joyce is a head-over-heels lover of happy endings. She's also a member of RWA and an award-winning romantic suspense author. Please welcome Joyce Lamb.
Thanks. Thank you, Cindy Quirk. I have to thank Entertainment Weekly, of course, because they wrote the article that I wrote the post about. What I loved about it was that I was on vacation when I heard that Entertainment Weekly had done this big spread about romance. And I thought, well, do I really want to read it? Because stuff like that usually kind of irks me. Because, usually halfway into not even halfway, you're in the first paragraph and the words bodice ripper come up. I'm like, well, do I really want to kind of be irritated on my vacation? I'm like, well, I'll take a chance and I'll take a look at it. And it was really kind of nice, It was like, hey, you know, I think this woman actually knows the industry. And so Karen Valby, you know, I'm sure you're out there. Thank you very much for writing such a nice story about us. And feel free to do it again, because I like getting awards.
And I want to take a minute to recognize one of our centennial winners. Remember, those are the writers among us who have written 100 books. Deborah Webb wasn't with us yesterday, and I'd love her to stand and sort of wave, because wow, what an accomplishment. Congratulations on receiving the RWA Centennial Award. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker. Julia Quinn is a best-selling, Rita Award-winning author. She's also one of only 15 members of Romance Writers of America's Hall of Fame. Her books have been translated into 26 languages, and in the United States alone, there are over 10 million copies of her books in print. Please join me in welcoming Julia Quinn. Thank you.
Good. A lot of people here. I walked in with my husband and I said, I'm a little nervous. I don't usually mind public speaking, but there are 2,000 people here. And he said, oh, you'll be fine. I said, well, have you ever spoken to 2,000 people? And he said, oh, 3 is my limit. And I was like, thanks. Anyway, good morning, and thank you all for coming today. So the purpose of a speech like this, or so I'm told, is to say something fabulously inspiring, something moving, something uplifting, anything that will compel all of you, whether you're published or aspiring, to return to your computers with renewed vigor and excitement. And then once you're there, with your butts firmly planted in your chairs, you will, of course, attack your manuscripts with power and fervor, lost in your blissful haze, because you are a writer, damn it, and you have a calling, and you will succeed. Except I'm not so sure it actually works like that. I mean, don't worry, I'm not talking about the part about you succeeding. That you can totally do. What worries me is the part about the blissful haze, and what worries me even more is the part about everyone attacking their manuscripts with fervor, because frankly, I don't know anyone who manages to write one word without first making coffee, and then checking their email 6 times, and then reheating the coffee, and then emptying the dishwasher, and then moving the laundry from the washer to the dryer, and then checking their email 4 more times. And then, of course, it's time to make new coffee. But the folks here at RWA have been kind enough to invite me here, and not to mention the general display of faith inherent in such an invitation. In other words, the assumption that I actually do have something to say that will make you want to write more than you want to drink coffee. And I know what a tough job that is, because I live in Seattle, and I never want to write more than I want to drink coffee. But I racked my brain, and I tried to figure out if I did have one kernel of truth, one fabulous speck of wisdom that I could impart. And I did come up with one thing, although I have to warn you ahead of time. At first glance, or first listen, I guess, it doesn't seem very inspiring. And in fact, on the surface, it might sound almost depressing. But the truth is, if you can grasp this, I really do think that in time, you'll feel less burdened, less stressed, and maybe a little freer to move forward and just write. And here it is. You have to learn, and more importantly, you have to accept that you can't please everyone all the time. And this becomes really important once you're published. You need to understand that not everyone is going to like everything you write. And most painfully, there will come a time when someone who does like everything you write stands up and says, well, except that one. And it will happen, trust me. But I can't tell you how important it is to just make peace with this. You have to. You will go insane if you don't, or you will get angry, or you will burn out, or you'll worry and get stressed until you make yourself sick. And take it from me, that is not fun. So don't get me wrong. I don't mean to say you shouldn't ever worry or stress or get angry or even go insane, but you need to keep it all in perspective. You need to find a little balance. And unfortunately, that's not always easy to do. Chances are, your first lesson in this will come early in your career, with your critique group, with a rejection letter. For me, however, it came from my mother. Yes, my mother. And it wasn't what you think. I mean, I know that there are a lot of romance writers out there who, feel kind of uncomfortable with their parents reading their work, especially, you know what parts. Okay, but my mom was a school nurse. She had to teach health to 7th grade boys, okay? Some of you have 7th grade boys, and if you don't, maybe you remember them. They're like a pack of monkeys, okay? There was nothing in my books that was going to freak her out. So when she expressed an interest in my writing, I sent her a printout of my very first manuscript. And I have to digress here because I don't know how many of you actually still print out manuscripts. But this was a while ago when we did print them out. And, the first time you print out your manuscript, it's amazing because it looks so big. And you just look at it and you think, oh my gosh, it didn't look that big in my computer. It's like a total thrill. But anyway, I printed it out, slapped like a crazy amount of postage on it, and popped it in the mail and waited for her to get it and read it. And then when she did get back to me, she said, it was pretty much what I expected. She's like, this was wonderful. I had no idea you could write so well. So I, puffed out with pride, and I patted myself on my back. And then she said, but, it's not Judith McNaught. Yeah. Although, in a way, she was very helpful because I took these words to heart when I agreed to my first publishing contract with all the good folks down there. And I wasn't Judith McNaught, and therefore I needed to remember that I couldn't expect Judith McNaught's wages, or even a 10th of Judith McNaught's wages, or sadly for me, a 20th, or, so Anyway. Now, in my mother's defense, I have to say that she's one of my biggest champions. This is a woman who self-describes as shy, but she will strike up a conversation with anyone she happens to be standing next to anywhere. And so, if she sees somebody reading one of my books on an airplane, she will insert herself into their lives and then explain to them why they should be reading one of my books. She will rearrange entire romance sections to give me better shelf space. Yeah. And she absolutely, positively, categorically denies that she ever said anything about Judith McNaught. But come on, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, I'm a writer, but I'm not that good. And then, while we're on the topic of families, I'm going to bring up a story about my husband since he's here, and I get to embarrass him a little bit. He is a little bit behind in the Julia Quinn oeuvre. He's actually 21 books behind. But he's a busy guy. He's, this is where I get to brag a little. He's a renowned expert in the field of tropical medicine and infectious diseases, and which is why, you always have to be careful before you look over his shoulder when he's working at his computer, because he might be writing up something called Tropical Medicine Jeopardy for his students, and you'd be like, wow, what came out of my butt for 20? He writes a different sort of thing. I don't remember the answer, by the way, but if you want to know, he's here. But anyway, he was a little bit behind, and his dad is also a novelist, and I saw him one day, and this was probably about, 8-10 years ago. So at that point, he was only maybe 11 books behind in the Julia Quinn oeuvre, and I was like, he was reading his dad's manuscript, and I said, well, and then I walked away, and I was like, And so then I said, honey, I think, he's smiling because he knows what I'm going to say. I said, I think if you have time to read your dad's book, maybe you have time to read one of mine. And I didn't realize it at the time when I said this, but there was only one thing he could answer that would not only get him out of this sticky situation, but place him so high on high that seriously no other romance writer husband possibly could ever compare. He just looked at me and said, "Well, you don't need my help." Yeah. We're still married. Anyway, but getting back to this, getting back to the disappointments you may feel. The thing is, you'll experience something like this, like the thing with my mother, in the days or weeks or months before you publish. And hopefully it won't come at the hands of the one who bore you, but somebody is going to read your stuff and just not like it. Or maybe she'll like it, but she won't be wowed. Or she'll like it, but not enough to offer you a publishing contract. And I'm going to digress again and tell you about the time when I was trying to sell my first book. And I don't know if Shauna Summers is here. She worked for Bantam at the time. And when they rejected my book, they accidentally left all their sticky notes on the manuscript with their in-house notes. And I found out that she really wanted to buy the book, but like her boss was all, "This is boring." So anyway. So you have to kind of take a grain of whatever with it. But if you're really, really lucky, maybe this won't happen to you. I don't know. And allow me to be the first to offer my congratulations, but also a warning, because your time will come. And maybe it'll be when your first book comes out. By then, your mother will have forgotten that she compared you unfavorably to Judith McNaught, and she'll be thrusting your book into the hands of every person you see, and you will be on a high like you have never known. Your book will be at Amazon, in bookstores. When my first book came out, there was this thing called Walden Books. Remember that? Yeah. Anyway, it was the most amazing thing. My local Walden Books called me the weekend after my release date to tell me that they'd already sold 9 copies of my book. Yeah. And you know what that meant? That meant that 9 people who weren't related to me had bought my book. Another crazy cool thing, you might see your book in a supermarket. Okay, not your supermarket, because there is a law of physics that once you finish all the computations and boil it down and all that stuff, it says that no matter how famous and successful you are, no matter how many times you hit the bestseller list or how many zeros there are at the end of your advance or print run, your book will never show up at the supermarket or drugstore at which you do your regular shopping. It just won't happen. You are more likely to see the President of the United States than your own book in your local supermarket. And when this happens, when you're strolling down the book aisle and you see every single title from your publishing house except your own, and you will see every other title, I guarantee it, great distribution people, there's only one thing you can say to yourself. And since it never hurts to practice, you can all repeat after me. Are you ready? I'm sold out. I mean, it can be the only explanation, right? I'm so popular that all my books are sold already. So, and then maybe you get like a little bit catty and you can even be like, I'm sold out, and she's not. But there's one sad side effect to this. You can't go shopping with your writing buddies, because I live like 20 minutes away from another author, and I do not dare step into a supermarket with her because we both have the same publishing house, and we often have books out the same month. And frankly, I don't know enough about physics to predict the outcome. Like, it could be a disaster. If you always see every other book but your own, what happens when 2 of you walk in together? Maybe you'll break the curse, and you'll both be there, side by side, like really pretty under a sign that says bestsellers. Or you could throw a jinx on the whole thing, severely disrupting the space-time continuum, and thus causing your books to disappear from every shelf in every Safeway in the nation. And I don't mean disappearing into the hands of readers. But you'll find that a lot of publishing is like this, voodoo. You know, and if it's not voodoo, I don't want to hear about it, because it means I'm either not smart enough to understand it, or I've got to accept that there's meaning behind all this madness, and that's enough to blow my mind to Hong Kong. But I digress. I digress a lot, I'll just warn you. I was talking about what happens when your first book comes out. When my first book was published, it was in the very, very early days of the internet, so it was difficult to get a handle on what readers were saying. There was no Amazon, no Goodreads, no Facebook, no Twitter, no HEA blog, nothing. What I had were a few bulletin boards on AOL. And so, of course, I found them and lurked and looked, and I knew, I could see that a lot of readers were liking it. Well, not a lot of readers, but it was my first book, which by definition means that not a lot of readers actually read it. But of the readers who did read it, a fair number of them actually seemed to like it. And you think that that would feed your soul, leaving you basking in some sunny kind of glow, except, all right, somebody's busted. You knew there had to be an except, didn't you? Except for that one review I got. Now, to be fair, this one review wasn't that bad. More than anything, it was just kind of strange. And I'm very proud to say I do not have it memorized word for word, but I believe I was likened to Nancy Drew. Or maybe my heroine was likened to Nancy Drew, or maybe it was her cousin, I don't know. Somebody was likened to Nancy Drew. Except there wasn't a mystery in the plot. The whole Nancy Drew thing was really more of a backhanded way to call my writing juvenile, and more suited for juveniles. And I think the reviewer even came out and said something that indicated that she felt the book was more of a young adult read. Which puzzled me because while I'm not writing 50 Shades of Grey, the book was as explicit as the next historical romance, and I don't see how anybody could ever confuse it with anything that ought to be shelved in the children's section at Barnes & Noble. But this isn't really about the review. I mean, if it were really about the review, I would have forgotten it by now, because it certainly is not the only bad review I've ever received. No, this is actually about the personal letter that the reviewer felt compelled to send me to my home address. I don't know how she got that. In the letter, she advised me to stop writing, or at the very least, consider switching to a genre which might be more appropriate for my writing skills. Except that you could tell from this letter that she didn't think a whole lot of my writing skills. Now, I am not making this up. This really did happen. And as I'm sure you can imagine, it left me steaming mad for days. And it should have been my first warning. You can't please everybody all the time. And in fact, there's some people you are never going to please. Accept it, move on. Except, there's always an except, that however well you move on and with a smile on your face as you smack your nose up to the grindstone, something else always comes up. If you're lucky, the next whopper will come in a form so laughable that you can't take it seriously. Okay, now these are actually kind of fun. For me, it was an email from a reader I got, I think it was after my third book, and she actually said to me, and this one I do remember word for word, "You would be a better writer if you used more nouns, verbs, and adjectives." I finally decided I had to take this as a compliment. Because I think it takes talent to write a full novel with nothing but adverbs and prepositions. I can do it. Now, it's easy to laugh at this, but unfortunately, some of the other bits of feedback are not so easily shrugged off. In today's age, internet age, readers and writers connect to a degree unimaginable before. And for the most part, this is wonderful. I've been asked before, as I'm sure many of you have, if I would write if I weren't published. Would I scribble in my room if I knew that no one would see my words but me and maybe a cat? I don't think so. In part, let's be frank here. It's about money. It's nice to be paid for what we do, and don't you let anyone under the pseudo-intellectual guise of the beauty and glory of literature tell you otherwise. The people who try to tell you that there is something distasteful about success tend to be the people who aren't successful. Or even worse, the people who assume that if something is liked and enjoyed by a large number of people, especially women, it must be crap. But there's another reason, and it's a big reason, that I don't think I would scribble in my room if I knew my words would never be read. And it's right there in the last sentence. I like to be read. I like knowing that people are reading my work, and as much as it sometimes bites me in the butt, I like knowing what they have to say about it. When I look up my books on Amazon, I'm not checking the ranks, I'm reading the reviews. And I'm well aware that this can be a total rabbit hole, because when somebody really hates your book, you can't really help clicking on her name to see what other books she reviewed. Yeah. Okay, you're laughing because you've all done this. And then you're like, and did she like those books? I like to know what readers think, especially because with a lot of negative reviews, there's a kernel of something in there, something that maybe I suspected all along, or something that I knew would be divisive. I'm always trying to grow as a writer, and if I can learn something from reader reviews, I'd be silly not to pay attention. So I think it's fairly safe to say that I thrive in my own somewhat dysfunctional way on the open channels of communication between author and reader. But no matter how wonderful this process may be in theory, there will always be someone who feels the need to let you know directly just how bad they think you are. And I'm not talking about like an Amazon review here. I'm talking about the email or the tagged tweet or the post on your Facebook page. And I can't explain, but there's something especially cutting and personal when someone takes the time to write to you, beginning with "Dear Ms. Quinn" or whatever, expecting an answer. And they begin with, "I have been one of your biggest fans for years, but I felt I must write and express my profound disappointment in your latest book." And I don't know why, but their disappointment is always profound. Most of the time, these letters, while disappointing, are pretty easy to deal with. You respond with a note saying how sorry you are that this book didn't work for them, but as you do try to make sure that each of your books is different and you're not writing the same book over and over again, you've accepted the fact that not all of your books are going to work for all of your readers. I don't know what that was. But have you? Have you really accepted that? They're having problems with the 8th floor setup behind me, I don't know. Because what about the letter you get from a reader who writes to express her profound disappointment that, for example, you didn't include an entire character in a book that she felt belonged there? This happened to me actually a while ago. I'd been writing, somewhat by accident, a series of books about 8 siblings. And I didn't set out to do this. In fact, when I started, it was just going to be a trilogy. And then my editor said, no, just do a duet. Because in her experience, and I wonder if she'll deny this now, sort of like my mom and Judith McNaught, she said, no, don't write a trilogy because the second book is always kind of lame. She said, because somebody's on their way now, so maybe that will stop. So anyway, she's like, well, the first book's great because like you're so excited about it, and then you save the really, enigmatic hero for the last one, so that's exciting, and then the second one's just filler. So anyway, but the series really took off, and it totally transformed my career. And then they said, well, actually, forget about 2 books or 3, can you do 8? And which was great. And the reason it took off was that my readers they became really emotionally invested in this family I created. And this is wonderful. I mean, it's absolutely fabulous. And the passion with which readers identify with and care about my characters has been one of the most meaningful achievements of my career. Except when you write a series, you have to walk a delicate balancing act. You have to consider the series as an entity, but you also have to think hard about each individual novel in its own right. And when push comes to shove, unless you're writing about recurring main characters, like mystery writers often do, your primary focus must be the individual novel. And if you sacrifice that for the sake of the series, you compromise your work and risk alienating and confusing every reader who finds you with that book, not having read anything else in the series. Not to mention that you may end up writing a novel that feels incomplete on its own or just plain doesn't make sense. But when you have a devoted fan base who've been following the series, they can get annoyed with you if you don't do what they want. And so when I chose not to bring a certain character into one of my books, a number of my readers wrote to ask why. And then a few went beyond simple curiosity to express their profound disappointment about this. But then, one of them went so far to write the scene for me. Yeah, not word for word, but she gave me the outline with a play-by-play down to a tearful embrace. She was expecting that scene, she wrote. She deserved that scene, and it should have been there. You know, never mind that this scene would have been nothing more than an epilogue to a previous novel, or that it would have been redundant, and I would have had to eliminate an entirely different scene to make room for it, a scene that I personally adored. This reader had a firm idea of what my novel should have been and what it should have contained, and I did not deliver. And I've been trying to figure out just what it was about this particular reader email that got to me. This may also be why I no longer have an email link on my website. But I've certainly received worse. There was a lady who asked me if I was living in an alternate universe because of a historical error I had made, and in her universe, people didn't do that. And I was like, ugh. Then there's the reader who claimed I was single-handedly bringing down the entire historical romance genre. Actually, there's like an entire club of readers who believe this, and now I'm kind of proud of it. But anyway, this one who rewrote my book for me, it needled, and I finally figured out why. It wasn't that she didn't like what I had written. I have plenty of people who don't like that. It was that she decided to rewrite it. She took me to task for not writing my novel the way she wanted it written. And I think that was when I finally accepted what I've been trying to convince you of. You can't please everybody all the time. You can't. But there's a flip side to this. And remember how I said at the beginning that my great and fabulous kernel of wisdom was only depressing on the surface? Well, here's where we finally get to the good stuff. When you accept that you can't be everything to everyone, you free yourself to write the story you need to write. You learn to listen to your gut, to trust your instincts, and to push yourself. You take chances, you dig deeper, and you become a better writer. And no matter how good we are, and come on, we're great, right? Yeah. We can always be better. Okay, now, I'm not saying throw all caution to the wind and never listen to anyone but yourself. I am obviously incapable of doing that if my obsession with Amazon reviews is any indication. But what I'm trying to tell you is, I do listen to what people say. I do listen to my readers, and I listen to a lot to my editor, who's almost always right. And I keep what they have to say in mind when I'm crafting my books. There's a reason they call it popular fiction. We want to be popular. If we couldn't manage it in high school, by God, we're going to do it now. And I'm guessing that since all of you are here at a conference for writing romance novels, that you too would like to be liked and have your work published and enjoyed. But no matter how much attention you pay to the market, and you should pay attention to the market, the choices you make will be better informed if you do, even if you do decide to disregard all conventional wisdom and set your book in ancient Mesopotamia. Well, at least you will know what you're getting into. But even with all that outside information, you have to learn to set yourself free and trust the voice inside. And when you do, the results will be magic. Now, I've done a lot of complaining in this speech. I've shared with you the frustrations I often feel when it seems like everyone wants a piece of me or my writing. But luckily, these examples are few and far between. Most of the time, I can trust the storyteller inside, and readers connect with that. And sometimes it moves them. And that's when I know that everything I'm doing, every risk I take, every time I go with my gut and write the story I need to write, it all leads back to something very, very special. And so I'd like to share with you an email I received from a reader. Dear Ms. Quinn, I want to thank you for the enjoyment you bring to your readers. I'm a 23-year-old wife of almost 6 years and a mother of a 5-year-old, Yes, you can do the math. That's her words, not mine. The first book of yours I read was How to Marry a Marquis. I was instantly ensnared in the historical romance genre, and soon after bought all your books. My mother was a strict Stephen King fan or a fan of suspense novels. She told me that romance books were sappy. I convinced her to read The Duke and I, and she quickly turned to the Viscount who loved me. She was constantly telling me to hurry up and finish a book so she could read it. On Valentine's Day of 2001, my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer. Each chemo treatment was anywhere from 2 to 6 hours long. I was what they call a caregiver for my mother. I was at every doctor's appointment, every chemo and radiation treatment with my mom, so you can imagine how much reading we did. They had these ugly blue leather recliners for us to sit in during chemo. I remember the day that an offer from a gentleman came out. She insisted that we stop and get it before heading to the chemo center. I was sitting there already on page 50, 45 minutes into the treatment, and I hear this really loud sound that sounded like my mother had tooted. I looked over at her, and she quickly looked away from me. I was not about to embarrass her by bringing it to her attention. 10 minutes later, I heard the same sound. I looked over again, and my mom was trying extremely hard not to laugh. I asked what was funny, and she said nothing. So I went back to reading, and I hear it again not 5 minutes later, and I looked at my mom and said, "Mom, do you need me to get the nurse to unhook you so you can go to the bathroom?" She just busted out laughing and said, "I swear it wasn't me." I looked around our little cubicle and back at her as if to say, "We're alone, who else could it be?" She sat back in her chair and then leaned toward me again, and there was that sound. She laughed again and then finally said, "I've been trying to read over your shoulder, but every time I lean toward you, the chair makes a sound like I farted." There were quite a few hospital visits that consisted of 12-hour days and then coming home to my son and my husband. When Romancing Mr. Bridgerton came out, I passed it to my mom after reading it, and soon after she was back in the hospital. 3 days later, my mom died on August 3rd, 2002. Her name was Donna Dudley, and she was 39 years old. She would have turned 40 on December 22nd. She'd been trying to finish the book because she knew her time was short. She didn't get to, and I'd forgotten all about it until I unpacked her bag from the hospital and noticed it wasn't there. I had to go back to that room to get it. That was hard, but I finished reading it to her at her gravesite. My point in this is that while we were already best friends and while the illness brought us closer, sharing a common interest in books gave us just that much more to talk and laugh about. I thank you for that. I apologize if I seem to have rambled. But I don't have any friends around my age, and my social life consists of visiting my mother-in-law and visits to my dad and younger siblings who now look to me for advice and guidance. So adult conversation is nice. Thank you so much for sharing your talent. God bless Tanya Hall. I included that letter because it moved me more than no other piece of correspondence I've ever received from a reader. And it's in its own quietly powerful manner, it blows away all of the negativity and frustrations I sometimes feel when I sit down to write. And when I'm trying to keep at bay all of the pressures upon me to make this book not just the best book I think I've ever written, but the best book anyone will think I've ever written. But you know what? I'm not going to write that book. And that's okay. Because when I sit down to write, I listen to this, and I listen to this, and what emerges from my fingertips is the best I can do. And if I achieve that goal, that's a marvelous thing indeed. Thank you.
Such a good speech. Ooh, a gift?
Thank you so much.
Wow, what a powerful speech. Thank you, Julia. I always like those little heart-tugging things. It was very nice, very good. We've got a full day of workshops and book signings. If you're still hoping to get an editor-agent appointment, stop by the West Side Ballroom to see what might be available. And as a special treat on the books on the table, Julia has agreed to be available to sign them. Do you remember promising that, Julia? Or maybe she didn't promise and we just decided it'd be a nice perk. She'll be sitting right outside the door in just a minute to do that. We'd also like to ask your help. If you see any extra books or journals at your table today, please take them to the back of the room and leave them on the table. The RWA staff thanks you for your help. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.